Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Changing Landscapes, or How Blended Learning Supports the Way Teachers Teach and Students Learn. Several upcoming events I'd like to make you aware of, ladies and gentlemen. Getting ready for the next generation assessments, our Common Core State Standards Summit 2.0. This is huge, folks, a chance to really understand some solutions and apply and implement the Common Core State Standards. Strongly urge you to check that out. The Common Core Standards are far more rigorous than many of us are currently being led to believe. Even as recent as the MetLife survey just about a month ago, saying that 90% of teachers and 90% of administrators believe they're ready for Common Core State Standards, and Charlotte Danielson would beg to disagree. May 15th and 16th in New York with Kathy Lasser, Lori Cook, Lynn Howard, and Lisa Siebelak. If you'd like some more information about that event, please contact Brooke Little at the address that you see there on the screen, brooke.little@hmhco.com. Following that, there's an event featuring Paul Tuff, the author of It's Being Done, the Next Generation Instruction Summit, Creating High Impact Practices. 2 days with our engaging instructional experts, taking a look at high-yield instructional practices that bring your classroom into the next generation, and that will be June 26th and 27th in Denver, Colorado, with a whole host of my colleagues who I am very fortunate to work with that you see there on the screen. Hundreds of years of educational experience represented in all kinds of settings, from provincial schools through large urban settings, so all represented there for you in those presenters. And again, contact Brooke Little with any questions that you may have. Another event I'd like to point out to you is the upcoming National Singapore Math Institute. Dr. Yeet Bon Har. Folks have to stay for a little bit. My wife actually attended this summit last summer and walked away totally energized, both feeling validated in some of the things that she was doing in her classroom and learning lots of new ideas to go back and implement. And she ended up with well over 90% of her students passing the state math assessment. This will be well worth your time. Not only Dr. Bon Har, but my colleagues Jan Christensen, Rich Allen, Lori Cook, Amanda Gomez, and Tremaine Nelson, all very experienced practitioners in mathematics, and will bring you the latest information to go back and implement in your classrooms. Okay, your presenters today. I am Tony Flach. I have the honor of being a Distinguished Professional Development Associate at the Leadership and Learning Center, and have been with the center now for 10 years. Formerly of Norfolk Public Schools, Norfolk, Virginia, and have to take a moment to say thank you to a current client. Bruce Drysdale Elementary School in Henderson County, North Carolina, is gracious enough to host me this morning as we bring this webinar to you. With us today are Wynn Alison Lee. Wynn began her career as an elementary teacher for 13 years and joined Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in 2004. She has served as an educational support specialist, a product marketing manager, and a director of partnership operations. We were lucky to have Wynn join us in June of 2012, and she currently serves as the portfolio manager responsible for math, science, and technology content, and the development and management of professional learning communities and data teams. She is currently our lead person in the development of new courses devoted to blended learning. Also with us today is Dr. Debb Oliver. She's a professional development associate with us at the center. Also joined us about the same time as Wynn, and we are honored to have her as well. She's had 25 years of experience in the field of education. Prior to her current role, she spent 8 years with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt as a national consultant and portfolio manager for educational professional development. She has 18 years of experience in public education, including being a classroom teacher, district mentor, instructional coach, and program director for ELL students. Has a doctorate in educational leadership with an emphasis on educational technology and instructional design. Again, welcome to both Wynn and Deb this morning. And then the person without whom we could not do these webinars, Kathy Shulkin, is marketing coordinator for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and I've had the privilege of working with Kathy for about 12 years now, and I swear she hasn't aged in any of that time. So, terrific lady to assist us with our work today. So, first poll question for you today. We'd like to know who's with us today in the audience. Folks, if you would take a moment, please. The poll is open, and if you'll take a few minutes to respond to your role as it pertains to blended learning.
I am thrilled to have everybody joining us. It's very nice to see that we have a good mix of people on the line. It's very exciting. And thank you, colleagues, for that nice introduction. So today, with the next slide, Sir Tony, we're going to just talk about our objectives. Basically, we're here today to give you an overview of what's going on out there in terms of blended learning. What are the basics? What are the types of models that are being used across the country? And then we're really fortunate to have Deb here as our content expert to answer some questions that have been delivered via Twitter and some that you may have during this, what we hope will be a very interactive and informative session. So with that, we're going to talk about the basic definition of blended learning. Here at HMH, we're using this definition that is from a highly respected think tank in California called the Insight Institute. And if you just take a moment to read through this definition, the part that I find very critical is this blend and melding of the online delivery of content, the technology end of things, with the control over the student time, you know, the time, the place, the path, and the pace, as they call it here, so that there is a nice balance and give and take between the best of what a teacher can offer to a student and the best of what new technologies can offer a student. And now we're going to see that lovely little model that popped up a minute ago, which is also, thank you, from the Insight Institute. And if you look on the left side, I'm going to work my way from the top down for you. If you look on the left side, there's this notion of brick and mortar, traditional instruction, and what we call technology-rich instruction, which teachers are, in that type of instruction, teachers are using technology in creative ways with interactive whiteboards, perhaps introducing some sort of gaming, but it's really a traditional delivery inside a regular classroom. And on the right side, you see online. This has been around for forever. I mean, well, obviously not for forever, but for a couple decades at least, where especially in the higher ed department, where, you know, online delivery of content for businesses, for colleges, is become ubiquitous. But what's popped up very recently, I'd say probably in the last 10 years, are full-time virtual schools that are either part of a district or, you know, charter management organizations are using, and it's become a very different changing landscape because of this. Well, these two ideas of the brick and mortar traditional classroom and the online learning have blended or melded together to form what we really believe is going to be the next iteration and the next premier model of what's going on across the world in education. And four main models have emerged, and again, this is from the Insight Institute. That I think people will argue that there are more than four models. But in a nutshell, this idea of a rotation model, a flex, a SelfBlend model, and an enriched virtual model, every iteration of what's going on out there right now can pretty much be categorized somehow in one of these models. And before we switch to the next slide, I just want to point out underneath rotation model, there are iterations of that rotation model. I'm not going to get into all the details about those. The one you may be most familiar with is probably the flipped classroom model, which would be something akin to students going home and watching Khan Academy videos and then coming to the school the next day where the teacher is going to then review what they learned via the video. So, Sir Tony, if you look at the rotation model, this is a really good graphic of what would be going on right now in a traditional rotation model blended learning classroom. And I've added these arrows. If you start over on the right side, you can see the kids, and they are sitting at a computer station. They're getting some part of their instruction delivered to them via that technology. And then as we move around counterclockwise, you see the instructor who's working with a full little class. Well, it's actually a little station there, and he's delivering additional whole class concepts that those kids have to have. And then again, rotating towards another small group where this may be a paraprofessional, it may be a teacher assistant, but as you can see, the kids are, as the term implies, they're definitely just rotating through these stations to get their instruction. There are so many benefits, and I'm going to leave that to Deb to discuss in a few minutes, but the benefits of freeing that teacher from having to deliver whole class content all day, every day to all those kids, it is immense. So this, just to give you a feeling, is really the gist of what a rotation model is. Now, I talked about the Khan Academy and the flipped model, where students basically get their whole class instruction at home, and then the teacher will go ahead and deliver support the next day. There's also, within this context of rotation model, there is an individual rotation where either an algorithm or the teacher would set the course for the students, and again, they'd move through small group instruction or place-to-place instruction. So there are a lot of iterations of this, but this in a nutshell is the rotation model. So now if we go to, yes?
I'm sorry, Wayne, I was just going to say, that really allows teachers to respond to individual needs of students. That's a huge challenge as folks are looking at these new assessments, is trying to figure out how they're going to meet all of those needs.
Absolutely. And, I mean, the benefits of being able to free oneself as a teacher of having to do that whole class instruction is just huge. And not only that, it's actually quite the money saver as well, because that teacher can service many, many more kids in a better and more useful way, and truly more differentiated way than we've ever done before. So thank you, Tony. That's incredibly powerful. So another model, as we saw in that graphic a minute ago, is this notion of a flex. A flex model is one in which the students are going to a brick and mortar place. It's not necessarily a school, and all of their instruction, all of their content is delivered via a platform and via technology. In this model, the teacher is simply supporting the student and not delivering the content. This is much more like an online experience that we'll see in a second, a SelfBlend model. However, those teachers are vitally important, because as a student has questions, concerns, there's a live person on site supporting them. A lot of the dropout recovery and credit recovery blended learning programs started this way, and they have filtered down now to where more elementary students are starting to be exposed to this type of learning. And now, Tony, if we look at...
sorry, Wayne, just for my own clarification, but would that be similar to like where I've seen Read 180 installs in place?
Similar, yes. That was kind of our notion of, the notion of we can deliver content via technology. That is Read 180 is a program that would deliver it like this, but this is more of a model of learning, if you will. It's not a program. So the difference here, and that's a good point to bring up, is that the kids are not being exposed to one curriculum, if you will. They may have curriculum from numerous vendors and numerous publishing houses, and then also, as they're having difficulty, be pulled into small groups with a content area expert, a teacher, if you will, to assist them.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Next model is the SelfBlend. This is, if you are a high school student anywhere in the country right now, most states require at least one, and in some cases 2 courses to be taken online, really to get students ready for career and life in the 21st century with technology. So this is, basically supplemental online schools, and they offer a la carte courses, and the students individually choose what it is they want to learn about to supplement or enhance their high, well, it's not even high school anymore. It's going down, clear down into elementary school. It's really, really important to those students that perhaps want to learn Latin, but they live in rural North Dakota. And it's just not feasible to hire a teacher to go and teach that course. They can go to their library, get online, and have a full experience online to learn whatever it is that they want to learn. So it's a cost savings. It's preparing them for life outside. And you know, and actually, my daughter, who's in college right now, figured out that she was missing a course, and so she wants to go travel this summer, so she's going to do one of her first online courses. So it's a very cool notion. And then finally, we get to the next slide, which is Enriched Virtual. Now, this is an interesting model because this model grew out of schools that were mostly purely virtual, that found that the students needed more support and needed that face-to-face. And this is truly, when I think about a blended learning model, I think this is the best of the best. This is when kids spend part of their time in a brick-and-mortar classroom in small groups with a teacher and part of the time learning online remotely. So they get really, truly the best of both worlds. And those basically are the four, models, if you will, that everything else that's going on out there can somehow be categorized in one of these ways. But as I started this conversation, of course, there are other ways that blended learning is being implemented.
Before we go on, perhaps I just want to stop for a moment and see if there's any of our participants have any questions about any of these different techniques that Wynn has just discussed. And we do have
sure, I'd love questions.
We do have one question here from Patricia. Is Enriched Virtual the same as a flipped classroom?
Okay, good question. The flipped model is really part of it's categorized right now as part of a rotation model, and that is because when the content in a flipped model, as I said earlier, the whole class content is delivered somehow outside of the brick and mortar classroom, and then the students come in to the classroom with questions, concerns, and the need for deeper differentiation, deeper instruction. So that's the flip. They're not coming in and sitting with a teacher and having all that content delivered with them. They already have the content, and now they need to practice it. So this Enriched Virtual, you could use a flipped model within an Enriched Virtual model because the kids could go home, get content remotely, and then come into the classroom. Because they divide their time between the classroom and online, they could come into the classroom and get additional practice with the teacher. So you can see how these models start to meld into each other, but that notion of flipped really is just part of a rotation model. I hope that helps.
And we have another question from Mary Lou. What does research say about the various models regarding student success generally and special populations?
Oh, very, very good question. The part of what Deb and I have been spending copious amounts of time doing is digging into the research and finding nuggets of information. There are foundations right now, especially Susan and Michael Dell and the Gates Foundation, that are doing the lion's share of the research. Since these models have emerged fairly recently, there's not a lot of hard and fast research, and I'll turn that over to Deb in a minute to discuss. But in general, and let me just I'll give you an example, especially in California, since the budgets have been completely slashed and burned, schools like KIPP, which is Knowledge and Power Program, and Rocket Ship Education, they happen to be charter organizations. They have employed teachers and technology to get the kids up to speed, to use the technology to really differentiate and dig deep, especially for kids with special needs, you know, to use that technology that really draws them in, really motivates them, gets them excited and happy to learn. They are seeing immense gains across the board. Their test scores are going through the roof. But as I say, I'll let Deb address that in a little bit, but it's very new research.
Thank you, Wynn. Those are great. And thank you, participants, for your questions. And keep them coming, and we'll address them as you ask them. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. And as we're developing professional development in support of this new pedagogy, we really want to hear from you. So anything we can do to help each other will be awesome.
And Patricia just snuck one in. Patricia just snuck one more in, if I may. I apologize for interrupting. Will Harcourt make online content learning available for home use? If so, can you elaborate?
That is a very good question. I do not know the answer. I can tell you that we are moving in that direction, but I do not know what the grand plan is. I know that we are moving towards a more robust delivery system with a platform whereby teachers and students can access our content from anywhere. So I would imagine that that is going to be part of the plan.
And Robin asks, before we move on, she's not familiar with the terminology. How is Enriched Virtual different from homeschooling? When will the research be completed on the models? So it's a couple of questions in there.
So let me give you a couple good websites, and Kathy, I think we can post these after the webinar as well. There are two really good places to go for information, deeper information about these models. One is the International Association for Online Learning, which is iNacol, and it's lowercase I, capital NACOL.com. They have a tremendous wealth of research on their website, and they also publish something called the Keeping Pace Guide, where they go out and really research state by state what's going on in blended and online learning. It's really the most comprehensive site out there. There's also the Innosight Institute, which is the think tank that I referenced earlier, and that's INNOSIGHT institute.com, and they again have much more in-depth information about the models. The thing I will tell you about Enriched Virtual is that the parent is not the teacher. So in Enriched Virtual, they're getting an online course which would be delivered through a learning management system with some sort of teacher voice behind it, whether it's somebody that that student logs into and sees via Skype, or whether it's a voice, an audio that's playing in the background delivering the content. They're learning part-time like that, and then part of the time they're going to a school and being taught by a certified teacher. So that's the difference. It's not a model where you would have a parent leading it.
And Patricia has asked a question which I think we all ask at one time or another. The parents are sometimes reluctant to let their children loose on the internet. Is there a safe access?
Right, and you know what? This is part of what is embedded in our professional development, and Deb and I feel very strongly about getting the word out that our students are using technologies every day, and especially the generation that's being brought up right now. It's hard for us as parents to release the responsibility and trust that there are places to block where they need to be blocked, but to not stunt our children's growth in the use of technology by not giving them the access that they need. So when you talk about schools that are involved in bring your own device and using devices in the classroom, it becomes a huge issue, and different schools and states are instilling their own policies to keep our kids safe. But we need to get into the 21st century and realize that it's something we all need to think about clearly, and it's an important issue. But we need to let them use the technologies as well. And that was my soapbox. I'll let Deb field that when we get to a little discussion of policy.
Well, and actually, maybe this is a good segue. Deb, how many states do you know are actively have a policy supporting or are exploring blended learning? I ask because I know my own home state of North Carolina is looking to do more with it.
Oh, sorry, I needed to unmute.
And Deb, I'm turning it all over to you now.
Oh, okay, very good. Hi, everybody. Every state right now is in a position where they are looking at utilizing how technology is going to be used in their schools and their districts. And within the next 5 years, it's projected that every state is going to be supporting some type of blended learning, and that's where there's an inclusion of online learning, not just the technology in the classroom, as Wynn was describing, where we will see, I believe it's 88% of our high schools will offer some type of online courses, and that's every high school, for credit recovery, for their direct instruction, or however they're going to be doing that. But we're going to see this massive growth in the next 5 years, and projected in the next 3 years that that the transition is really going to take place. And Tony, as you had mentioned earlier, when we look at the assessments that are coming in, coming out, and needing to prepare for that, so states on the whole are very supportive. And we've got the superintendents organizations that it is a main focus of what they're looking at.
And part of the question of self-interest, we're in a smaller county where a lot of the more esoteric courses, like Wynn was talking about, Latin, are not offered. So I know that our county in particular is looking to offer more of that in this kind of model. Would you say that's pretty much it?
That's very true. And the other thing to think of that smaller districts are doing is they're really getting together to provide, they're partnering together to provide these online courses, and having a blended model where it may not be a face-to-face in a brick and mortar, but it would be a time of these rural districts where students are able to take courses, whether it's Latin or an engineering course where the districts they don't have the expertise. Students are taking these courses online and then meeting virtually with an instructor and doing group work completely virtually, but it's still considered within our blended models because they are getting direct instruction, and it is face-to-face. They just aren't able to touch each other, if you will. They're not together.
And Deb, could you speak a little bit about funding? I believe we've just gotten a question regarding funding for this type of model, these types of models.
Sure. We'll hit on some funding real quick. There are many ways that districts are looking at funding. Some examples. I was recently in a district who had a bond passed, looking down the road 4 or 5 years. So over the next 5 years, they're going to be financing, if you will, through a bond that was passed, the purchase of the technology that was necessary, the professional development that's going to need to go on along with integrating the technology, the purchase of an LMS, which is a learning management system. There are partnerships that are happening in districts right now with community organizations, large businesses that are helping to provide the support. And in other districts, they're looking at their funding differently, making some, we're really looking at a shift, an innovation, if you will, in the thinking of what's going on and how the districts are currently spending the money they have, and reevaluating and realigning the money within the district. To some real grassroots, and Tony, like the small district you're in, I was in a very small district in Wyoming recently where they literally were hosting T-shirt sales and bake sales and the good down home kind of fundraising to buy the technology tools. They were working to get computers on wheels, laptop carts,
right.
And they were doing it in a very grassroots way.
Yeah, it's a huge issue for schools. I know, again, speaking personally about our own small district, just the bandwidth requirements to support these kind of models, but they've been successful in creating wireless networks and public access through that as well to support the community.
And Deb, we have another question that you may be addressing ahead, but I'll pose it now anyway. Is there a possibility to get high school credit for our gifted track during online learning?
That would be an absolute, in my opinion, yes. There is the possibility of doing that. Let's see, I'm just trying to think of if there are the different models. When we think of the different models of what can happen, when we look at a self-blend, where a high school student would then be looking at classes outside of the core content, or it could be within the core content, but they're looking at those courses that they want to take online. They can take those courses, receive the credit through their high school for what they've done online. At High Tech High down in San Diego, California, they utilize some of that self-selection for the high school credit. There are schools all over the country that are now using for credit recovery for those students that missed the credit. So they're trying to recover that, and they're doing that in an online class, getting most of that there, but having the support in a brick and mortar space where they come together. But most of that learning is happening online. So being able to receive it, whether it's for gifted, for a language, credit recovery, it's very plausible and doable. It really just takes thinking.
It kind of leads us into our next poll, if I may, ladies and gentlemen. Next poll question, as Debb's describing ways to address the needs of all of our learners, we'd like to know which blended learning model best describes your current situation. And as folks are responding to that poll, Deb, the things that you're saying, especially looping back to the assessment issue, the computer adaptive testing that our students will be seeing as part of whether you're a park or smarter balanced state, or even in my former home state of Virginia that is chosen not to adopt Common Core, they're making similar adaptations to their state assessment. That's a whole new way of thinking about assessment that in and of itself is going to require a fair amount of coaching, modeling, and support for our teachers.
You're absolutely right. And a little farther down, that type of question was asked through registration. While you all are voting, through the registration process, there was a place to ask questions, and we had quite a few of you ask questions that you wanted to be answered, and some of them we just had answered here. Kathy sent those to me, and yesterday I went through and figured, kind of bunched them together. So hopefully I'll be able to get to those kind of questions, and it talks. We will be talking about the district plan and what needs to happen, and I might have us jump forward that way with the order. I just put the questions arbitrarily. Go ahead, Kath.
Okay, and we can close the poll. Excellent results. Whoops, didn't share. Let's see. Here we go. There we go.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's clear results. Thank you all.
And that, let's see, we've got some flex there. Okay. Which really does take us a question that was asked: what is the most popular way to blend in the elementary classroom? And in my experience, I'm going to say it is some form of the rotation model. That really is the most popular. But and that depends on the structure of the school and the tools that are available to what they have. So this model allows students to rotate between the online and the offline learning within their classrooms. They're actually doing individual and individualized instruction is coming online, and they're coming together whole group. They're not leaving to get that online instruction. That instruction and what's going on in this model is supporting, everything that they're doing. It already fits in the design structure of the classroom. It also fits, and it is the most popular because when we're looking at that in a financial way, it already fits in the structure that we currently have going on in our schools, typically our elementary schools, with and teachers are used to having those centers going on, if you will, in their classes and having those stations. It also can happen not just in the classroom, but it happens with labs, computer labs, where classes will go in and rotate and have direct instruction, if you will, or online instruction in a computer lab. There's an elementary school just outside of Sacramento, where they have 5 or 6 computers in every classroom, but they also have a lab. And at this school, all the way down to kindergarten, they're utilizing different programs where the students go in to the lab, so they're all working at a time. And what they've done is they've been able to look at their daily schedule, and while the lab teacher is in the lab, that's giving the classroom teacher her time or his time to have their planning and do those kind of things that that they're doing. So it's utilizing what's already within.
And Deb, I think our next question that came in was, why should we blend?
Why should we blend? The biggest reasons out there to why blend are here for you. It really creates that student-centered learning. It individualizes the instruction and the learning for the students. Tools are, we talk a lot about blended learning as, hey, it's all about the technology. The technology is the tool. It's really not about the technology. It's what we're doing and utilizing the tools at hand for that. It's what we do with them. Blended learning is truly a pedagogical shift in what we have thought about teaching and learning. Where rather than having us all on the same page and all of our students doing very similar things, we're allowing them to find their sweet spot and work that way. There are programs out there, if you're utilizing a learning management system, where it's tracking right away. Let's see. I want to talk about data. I've got a question about data, but we're really able to use data immediately when we blend because it's all given to us right there. So if you're using data teams or any kind of data model where you're talking about your students and you're really looking at your student work, it's so easily accessible to you. And it allows, I'm sorry?
Yeah, so I just want to chime in, and that assessment is not just for the teachers, it's for the kids. Some of the great things that the folks here at Bruce Drysdale are doing, where I'll be going after I finish this, is they're actually having the kids use iPads to tape themselves in reciprocal teaching partnerships, and they're self-assessing and setting their own goals for moving forward using that technology. They wouldn't be able to do that without the iPad in the classroom.
That's right.
We have just about 4 minutes left, Deb. Is there a slide you'd like me to jump to, just a most important question you'd like to address?
There's 2. If you'll just go quick to slide 20. This was a question that was asked by several, wondering, hey, what's an exemplary model out there of blended learning? 2 that I would highly recommend looking at: High Tech High, project-based learning. They're really focusing on deeper learning, and that's really the key and why we want to look at blended learning, because deeper learning is the key. It's a key ingredient in our school. It's giving students a unique, personalized learning experience, and that's what blended learning is all about, and that's the biggest why we want to have it. Using this, and since I don't really have time to talk about both of these schools as the exemplary model, they're worth. Check them out and how they're doing that.
And
we motivate students, there's student engagement. If you will go down to 24.
Awesome, and then I think Kathy has a final question for you.
Okay, because the biggest question that came is, how do I get started with blended learning? Really, you've got to do it. Whether you're in the classroom, whether you're a school principal, a district administrator, you know, it's that old adage, we have to do it. And if you'll go to the next slide, Tony, it takes more than just do it. I know that that's just giving it lip service. But what we've created is a framework that helps guide districts into looking at all of the research, looking at all of the schools that are out there, and in some form, whether they're having a pilot classroom in their district, but what needs to happen and how do we do that? And the first thing is we really have to look at, where are we? We need to have a tech audit and understand, what technology do we have? What does our staffing look like? What does our content look like? What are our pedagogical ideas that we're looking at? And then it needs to have strong leadership. There needs to be a vision that's truly believed by the leader, and a strong leader that has vision, that's entrepreneurial, that's truly thinking about not what we do this year or what we did last year, but what do we look like, and what are we going to need to have in 3 to 5 years? We're looking at resources, all of the resources, the financial, which we've talked about, human. How can we re-evaluate and repurpose the instruction, our teachers, our professional aides, the technical pieces that we have. And then, of course, it looks at the infrastructure, your framework to drive the student achievement. What does the content look like? The professional development that needs to happen. And then we measure impact of what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you, Deb. And I believe we have one more question from Kathy.
We do, and before asking this, I will just say I know that we got rushed here at the end, and we apologize. We did want to make sure, though, that while we had your specific attention, that we did address all of your questions online. All of these PowerPoints, this PowerPoint and the audio, will be posted within 48 hours on our website, so you can go back and look. And I please encourage you to either contact Deb or Wynn with further questions that you might have, so that you can continue the discussion. I know they're very, very looking forward to hearing from you specifically as well. The one question that Robin asked, that will be our last question that we'll ask, at least during this broadcast, is what will happen to the students that are not self-motivated? What about the social part of education? It's a huge question. I'm not sure we can answer it here, but I did want to put it out because I know a number of us do worry about that.
Well, I will just say that is a very large or deep conversation that we need to have. There are the motivation factor of using technology, allowing students to feel the power that they have of their learning and how they're doing it. When we start looking at the collaboration that's happening within this model, they're not silos. And Tony was mentioning how the students are using their iPads and they're self-assessing each other. They begin to learn how to learn. They learn how to evaluate themselves. They learn how to support each other. So it's not something that happens overnight, but as we're seeing through these different models and the schools and districts that are utilizing this, we're seeing a very big jump in student motivation, and those students that we wouldn't think are a self-learner or a self-starter, when they're interested in what they're learning and they have the opportunity to develop and create, answer problems, solve problems and questions, they begin to get motivated. Now, I know that sounds like this huge blanket statement, and you can be rolling eyes, yeah, right. But that is what has been happening. The anecdotes that are out there, that's what's happening with students. And I would love to continue that conversation at another time. You can tweet the conversation to me if you'd like. My hashtag is _Debb Oliver. Let's tweet. Let's continue the conversation.
All right, Ted, thank you very much. And Lynn, thank you for your time today. I sincerely appreciate it. Folks, all of our contact information is up there on the screen. Please don't hesitate, as Deb said, to contact us with any questions that we were unable to address today or beyond this, or other examples, or anything that you have in mind related to the blended learning, Common Core, or any of the upcoming events. And I appreciate your time and attention today, ladies and gentlemen.